There were a lot of things we couldn't do in an SR-71, but we were the fastest guys around and loved reminding our fellow aviators of this fact. People often asked us if it was fun to fly the jet because of this fact. Fun would not be the first word I would use to describe flying this plane. Intense, maybe, even cerebral. But there was one day in our SR-71 experience when we had to say that it was pure fun to be the fastest guys out there, at least for a moment. It happened when Walt and I were flying our final training flight. We needed 100 hours in the jet to complete our training and be mission ready. Somewhere over Colorado, we passed the 100-hour mark. We turned in Arizona, and the jet was performing perfectly. My gauges were working well in the front seat, and we were starting to feel pretty good about ourselves. Not only because we would soon be flying real missions, but also because we had gained a lot of confidence in the plane over the past 10 months. Flying over the barren deserts 80,000 feet below us, I could already see the coast of California from the Arizona border. Finally, after many humbling months of simulators and study, I was ahead of the jet. I was starting to feel a bit sorry for Walter in the back seat. There he was, with no really good view of the incredible sights before us, tasked with monitoring 4 different radios. This was good practice for him for when we began flying real missions, where a priority transmission from headquarters could be vital. It had been difficult, too, for me to give up control of the radios, as during my entire flying career I had controlled my own transmissions. But it was part of the division of duties in this plane, and I had adjusted to it. I still insisted on talking on the radio while we were on the ground, though. Walt was great at many things, but he couldn't match my skill at sounding smooth on the radios, a skill that had been sharply honed with years in fighter squadrons where the slightest radio mistake was serious. He understood that and allowed me that luxury. Just to get a sense of what Walt had to deal with, I pulled the radio toggle switches and monitored the frequencies along with him. Most of the radio chatter was from Los Angeles Center, far below us, controlling daily traffic in their sector. While they had us on their radar briefly, we were in uncontrolled airspace and normally wouldn't talk to them unless we needed to descend into their airspace. We listened as the shaky voice of a lone Cessna pilot asked Center for a readout of his ground speed. Center replied, "November Charlie 175, I'm showing you at 90 knots on the ground." Now, the thing to understand about center controllers is that whether they were talking to a rookie pilot in a Cessna or to Air Force One, they always spoke in the same calm, deep, professional tone that made one feel important. I referred to it as the Houston Center voice. I have always felt that after years of seeing documentaries on this country's space program and listening to the calm and distinct voice of the Houston controllers, all other controllers wanted to sound like that, and they basically did. It didn't matter what sector of the country we were flying in, it always seemed like the same guy was talking. Over the years, that tone of voice had become somewhat comforting to pilots everywhere. Conversely, over the years, pilots always wanted to ensure that, when transmitting, they sounded like Chuck Yeager, or at least like John Wayne. Better to die than sound bad on the radios. Just moments after the Cessna asked about its speed, a Twin Beach chimed in, sounding rather superior, requesting its ground speed. "I have you at 125 knots, came the reply. I chuckled to myself. The Beechcraft pilot must have thought he was impressing the Cessna pilot. Then out of nowhere, a Navy F-18 pilot from Nas-Lemoore came on the frequency. You could tell right away he was a Navy jock by how cool he sounded on the radios. "Center, Dusty 52, ground speed check." Before Center could respond, I thought to myself, Dusty 52 has a ground speed indicator in that $1 million cockpit, so why is he asking Center for a readout? Then it hit me, old Dusty here wants every small plane from Mount Whitney to the Mojave to know just how fast he's going. He's the fastest guy in the valley today, and he's making sure everyone knows how much fun he's having in his new Hornet. And as always, Center replied with that same calm voice, more about accuracy than excitement. "Dusty 52, Center, we have you at 620 on the ground." I couldn't help but think, what a perfect opportunity. My hand instinctively reached for the mic button, but I had to remind myself that Walt was in charge of the radios. Still, I thought, it must be done soon. We'll be out of this sector and the chance will be gone. That Hornet had to be put in its place and put there now. I thought about all our simulator training and how crucial it was that we functioned well as a crew. Jumping in on the radios now could ruin everything we'd worked so hard for. It was a tough decision. Somewhere 13 miles above Arizona, a pilot was probably shouting inside his helmet. Then, I heard the click of the mic button from the back seat. That was the moment I knew Walter and I had become a team. With complete professionalism and no hint of emotion, Walt spoke. Los Angeles Center, Aspen 20. Can you give us a ground speed check? There was no hesitation, and the reply came as if it were the most routine request in the world. Aspen 20, I show you at 1,842 knots across the ground. It was the 42 knots that I loved the most. Center delivered that information with such precision and pride, you could almost hear the smile in their voice. But the exact moment I realized Walt and I were going to be great friends for a long time was when he keyed the mic again and said, in his best fighter pilot voice, Center, much appreciated. We're showing closer to 1900 on the money. For a brief moment, Walt was a legend, and we finally heard a little crack in the armor of the Houston Center voice when L.A. replied with, Roger that, Aspen. Your equipment is probably more accurate than ours. You boys have a good one. It all happened in just a few moments, but in that short, thrilling sprint across the Southwest, the Navy got shown up. Every other plane on the frequency had to bow to the king of speed, and most importantly, Walt and I crossed the threshold from being individuals to being a team. It was a good day's work. We didn't hear another peep on that frequency all the way to the coast. For that one day, it truly was a blast being the fastest guys out there. Story 2. A few years ago, I got promoted to a management position at the software company where I work. They told me I was specially chosen for the job. Even though it was a big promotion, I wouldn't get a pay raise until my team met the minimum performance standards. 2 years later, my team was performing better than ever, far beyond the minimum standards. Every quarter, I asked for a review for a raise, and every quarter, they found a reason to skip it. Finally, I brought HR into the situation because I was working hard and doing a great job. Suddenly, a review date was set for the end of the month. Funny how that works. But a week before my review, where I was sure I'd get my raise, my direct supervisor, who is also the CEO and a micromanaging weasel, changed the minimum requirements to just slightly more than my team's current stats. When I confronted him, he explained this move as an unrelated adjustment to account for improved average performance. Totally legit. With this change in place, a week later, he took the chance, with the HR director present, to express his deep disappointment in my performance. He warned me that I needed to go the extra mile next quarter or face disciplinary action since my team had failed to meet the new standards. I was so angry. I wanted to complain, but it was the CEO. Who could I complain to? He knew that and sneered at me whenever he could. So I worked even harder. I neglected my family and my health to push my team to their limits. We made it 2. I was going to show that Jerky couldn't win, unless he cheated. When it became clear that the CEO was going to have to face the lies he told me in the previous meeting with HR, he called me into a meeting to design a training handout for the team. We bounced ideas back and forth, but something was weird. Every time I tried to assign a task to someone or set a due date for the handout, the CEO avoided it. By the end of the meeting, we had accomplished nothing concrete, and he postponed the assignment for a later date. Since it was postponed, and I thought we would reschedule a follow-up, I filed my notes away and moved on to other work. A month after that planning meeting, I was called into HR and written up for failing to issue the training handout we had postponed. The CEO was there and brought his own typed meeting notes, clearly stating that I was assigned the task that day. I had no way to defend myself. He was lying. I said so, and they treated me like a difficult child. The CEO acted insulted and shocked. By the end, I was sent home for the day and demoted from the team I had built and worked so hard for. I still don't know why the CEO disliked me so much. He hired his most sycophantic assistant manager to replace me and told everyone how badly I had performed in that position. I'll never be chosen for something like that again because this jerk decided he didn't like me. That's it. No revenge, no justice. The bad guy wins. Maybe one day he'll die in a fiery car crash. One can only hope.